It could be. Yeah, we're on. So this could be the Tom and Brad show. But we'll see how it goes. Anyway, hey, I've got... Well, no, I was going to do that audio, but I'm going to do a different audio for Tim on his post when he joins us. So, anyway, I suppose Annoying Peasant Radio Show takes 7 billion and whatever, right? I don't know.
Billion, Tom? Doesn't that stretch things just a little bit?
Okay. All right, 7. Take 7. How's that over? Here you go, folks. Annoying Peasant Radio Show. Brad can't hear this. We're going to start her up.
Fire it up, boys!
Don't hang on to outdated imperialist dogma. Be free for the next episode of the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. And now, the Annoying Peasants.
Hey, welcome everybody. Annoying Peasant Radio Show here. Hey, I gotta march this down here. There we go. I get that to go down. I know that comes through. I gotta figure out how to eliminate that little thing on my Mac so you can't hear the volume going down. Anyway, it's kind of a rookie operation. That's what happens, right, Brad?
Tom, what are you doing?
I don't know what I'm doing. I never know what I'm doing. We're doing a radio show. What the heck?
I know, but get it right, dude.
Yeah. How long have we been saying that?
Yeah, well, that's what makes us so interesting.
Yeah, it's
We're our own cliffhanger before we even start the show.
What isn't that? Isn't that like what is it? What was that movie with Forrest Gump? Knowing Peasant Radio Show is a little like a box of chocolates.
That's a fact. One of my favorite movies, by the way.
Yeah. All right, your volume seems a little down to me right now, but that may just be me. I don't know if you toggled something, Brad, or...
Haven't touched anything.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know what that is. Haven't touched anything on my end either. Oh, I know what I did. Yeah, when I turned that volume up. Now talk.
Now talk?
Yeah, see, that's just maybe that'll help.
Okay.
If anybody... Hey, there's Tanya. Hey, Tanya's in the chat room. Tanya, is it any better now? I just turned Brad way up, I think. We'll see. Talk real good, Brad.
Talk.
Yeah, is that better, Tanya? If so, I may have figured out. Oh, yeah. She says, yep, in the chat room. She says it's better. So, that I think I figured out the problema, Brad.
Hey, Tom, let's do a show.
Let's do it. Fire it up. Start us off, Brad.
Let's cut out this monkey business. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. My name is Brad, and I'm joined by my very good friend and bestest buddy, Tom, a.k.a. Dr. Liberty.
Whoa.
And we're hoping to have our good buddy Tim join us as well. And we will, again, there's one of the little cliffhangers. We'll have him join us as soon as he gives us a call. But tonight's episode is entitled Safety Via the State, or, phrasing as a question, safety via the state? And I think Tom's answer to that would be not.
Not.
Hey, before we get trucking along, because we may lose him, it is Will Thorne's birthday today, and we want to wish him a very happy birthday. I know he's listening, and we appreciate you listening, Will. Thanks, and happy birthday, man.
Happy birthday, Will. Good for you, dude.
Yeah.
Hope your mom made you a big cake.
Yeah. And lots of sugar and ice cream and what's all this stuff.
And maybe you can throw some at your dad.
Yeah. I don't know. He's kind of a tough dude. I wouldn't mess with him that way.
That's exactly why I suggested it.
Ooh, you're crazy, man.
Yeah.
Will says thanks in the chat room. That's way cool, Will. Congratulations. I think he's like 57 years old today or something like that.
Boy, they grow up fast, don't they?
Yeah, they sure do. Let's see. Let me get back to the docket here and figure out what I'm supposed to be doing. Hey, I guess I got to give a big picture view on the show. I think there could possibly be a couple of newbies listening to the show again tonight. So let me just zip through this kind of quick like, and I guess we got to be prepared because Tim may call in at any moment too. So just keep. You ready for that, Brad? All right. Justice is not a system or rules and regulations that are created. Think about this, right? The reality of justice is that it is rooted in man's nature, right? And such it is properly revealed to us. Think about, nature's laws, like the law of gravitation. It's not, in a sense, it was never written down somewhere first, right? It's inherent in nature, and we discovered it. Man discovered it, right? Justice is, I would argue, the same way, right? And it therefore predates or precedes the existence of the state. A lot of people think justice is, as I mentioned, a system of rules or regulations and stuff like that. But it isn't, in fact, is my argument. And I'm saying it predates the state or precedes the state. So all the state can do is basically screw around with those basic rules. So let me get on with it here, though. Most hold that we put forth a radical philosophy on this show, the political philosophy of freedom, or in essence, a legal theory, if you will. This legal theory is essentially property rights rooted in self-ownership. Most are untroubled at this point, as the distinction between one's body and other things is pretty clear, right? People kind of know what's outside my body may or may not be mine, but what's below my skin or inside my skin, that's mine. So people are kind of clear there. But how does one come to own property, external properties, right? There are two means really available. One is essentially homesteading, that is the mixing of one's labor with formerly unowned stuff, right? This is also termed original appropriation. There are other means of acquiring property, and that'd be through voluntary exchange, or essentially they call them legitimate title transfers. Voluntary exchange is just that, an exchange where both or more, could be more parties, voluntarily choose to engage in a proposed transaction. The parties, I'm checking in, Tim's calling, the parties involved make the contemplated exchange as they understand that they will benefit from the transaction. This is vitally important to understand. Think about this. If you, for example, didn't believe you would benefit from making an exchange, you wouldn't make the trade, right? So this is important that both parties benefit from that transaction. And if that's the case, that is by definition the creation of wealth. So in a voluntary exchange, wealth is created. I know some people have trouble with that too. Other types of property transfers include, gifts, inheritance, or gambling. And when I say legitimate property transfers, and again, some people are going to have a little trouble with gambling, but we can do that on another show. However, these types of these types of exchanges are fundamentally different from coerced exchanges, exchanges in which force is initiated or threatened to induce the transaction. Force initiated or threatened means that one would not engage in that type of transaction voluntarily, right? That's why someone, held a gun to your head or threatened you. And as this is the case, wealth is necessarily destroyed, right? So the more voluntary exchanges that you engage in, the more wealth that's created. The more coerced exchanges that you engage in, the more wealth is destroyed, right? Or you get poorer. But the free market is essentially a summary of voluntary exchanges. It is the creation of wealth, and it provides for the incentives for entrepreneurs to make investments in the means of production with the aim of satisfying customers' needs or wants. Nothing evil there. A lot of people, the free market, you can't leave it up to that. Well, that doesn't sound so evil to me, right? As a supporter of freedom philosophy adheres to this idea of property rights coherently. So listen carefully to our following discussions and don't hesitate to ask questions regarding the consistency of our arguments and our adherence to property rights rooted in self-ownership. As Brad would like to say, we aim to make you think. With that, back to you, Brad.
All right. So, what are we? Oh, am I doing announcements?
Well, you're going to do this, the saying of the day.
Oh, the saying of the day.
You're going to be the magician here.
I jumped ahead. Call me Doug Henning.
There you go. See, you're a magician. You're jumping ahead.
Or who did ya? Houdini.
Yeah, that guy.
For my next amazing illusion, I will rename the Patriot Act the Freedom Act. Boy, is that not true or what?
Yeah, you commented to me on that
earlier in the week, or what was it, the end of the last week? I can't remember when I got that, but I thought that would be fun for you to read that one because it's so accurate. And we'll get into that a little bit because we're going to talk about Rand Paul and his filibuster and all his stuff going on. But I thought that was just it. Obviously, I love a little bit of humor in it, but I think it's actually quite true. I saw another cartoon today where a guy was coming a roller coaster car was coming out of a tunnel, and in that tunnel you could see security cameras looking back in that tunnel. Guy was up on the hill with his little cart getting ready to go down the hill into the next tunnel. By the way, the first tunnel was labeled the Patriot Act tunnel. The second one tunnel is the Freedom Act tunnel. Again, had gobs of security cameras and stuff in there too. It was like, that's all it is.
Well, so like we always talk about on the show, Tom, you and I are heavily Republicans, right?
Oh,
no, wait. Are we Democrats?
Are we the donkeys or the elephants? I can't remember now.
Wait, the red or the blue? I can't.
Yeah, it's got to be one of those two. That's your only choice, right?
Right. Well, but that's who we're pandering to because we're pandering to because we're really not in favor of either of them, are we?
I'm in favor of freedom. And if a red guy happens to wear that or use that as a badge of courage, I'm with him. If a blue guy does, if neither does, well, I'm with neither. To me, they're irrelevant. But
so we are agnostic.
Yes.
So I just love the fact that the Patriot Act becomes a Freedom Act. Like, it's going to be even better.
Yeah.
Or who thinks up these things? Seriously.
I always said I'm the world's worst marketer. I swear this stuff wouldn't work, but apparently it works every time. Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know how, people do it, how they buy it. I don't get it, but
in the end, is it not just the name? Doesn't this make it the biggest bait and switch of all time?
Hey, just change the wrapper, and I think the candy bar tastes better, right?
Right. But could it be any farther from the truth? I don't think it could.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yep.
Here we are, one more time. Alrighty, you want to do the announcement, sir?
Absolutely. I'd like to thank our good friend Tanya for joining us last week. Had a little technical issue on my side. But if you missed that show, it's a great one, and we encourage you to check it out. The link to it is on our Facebook page, which is Anointing Peasant Radio. What did you start to say, Tom?
I was going to break in and say, it's also, today is my son Alex's birthday. So
we're going to sing to him, right?
Yeah. Happy birthday. It would be so much better in person because it would embarrass him so much more. I mean, isn't that really the best thing about being a father is that you can embarrass your children?
I would hope so.
Yeah. I mean, it's the coolest thing ever. It's just watching them squirm. Happy birthday, Alex.
Absolutely. And it's a milestone one, right?
Yeah. 21.
Get out.
Yeah. Melissa was in a little bit of pain 21 years ago. Actually, she might still be in pain, but that's another topic.
And if Alex follows tradition, maybe he'll be in a little pain in the morning, but he probably won't.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so. He's not all into that, but
right.
But you never know. A father knows his son differently than other people do. So,
well, happy birthday, Alex! Congratulations, dude.
Yep, old fart.
Yep. AgriFest 2015 is at the Villa Marie Conference Center and Retreat, September 24th to 27th. Please save that date. That is in just south of Minneapolis, Minnesota, up here in the Great North, down by Red Wing, Minnesota, actually. And we will be there. We had Nick on a couple of weeks ago, the organizer of the event, and I'm sure we'll have him on again, but it'd be a great thing to attend, and we are looking forward to being there.
Yeah, if you go, bring something to sell or to make or something like that. Do something, I don't know, entrepreneurial. Remember, Nick said that's what he really would like. His vision for it would be more of than a philosophical thing, more of just a do your thing and exchange and trade, Bitcoin, whatever, barter.
Sure.
So, anyway.
Gets to the root of what an agorist is, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so suggested reading and watching is Watch Justice, What's the Right Thing to Do? It's episode 12, debating same-sex marriage, from Harvard Business School, Michael Sandel, who is a great presenter.
Yeah.
He does a great job of I think, making it so that he just has a nice cadence and a nice way of presenting that allows you to kind of think and digest, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And be worthwhile, very worthwhile. This is the final episode in the series. Again, we encourage you to view these at these thoughtful discussions. They're on YouTube, right?
Yes, they are, and usually the links are on the Facebook page as well.
Exactly. So check out our Facebook page as well for a variety of postings. Thanks to Tanya, Tim, and Cassie for those efforts. And our next show will be live a week from tonight, Tuesday, June 9th at 7 p.m. Central. And here's another cliffhanger recurring event.
Yeah.
We are contemplating a number of show topics. So please join us. Check our Facebook page. Probably we'll have that up prior to the show.
All right. Next up, I have you, Brad. I know you contacted me after last week's show. I can't remember what day. And I don't know if you had a take or a comment or just wanted to add to or whatever you had on the Memorial Day thing. And I put on the docket here for you, what Tanya and I kind of, my notes for that day.
Yep.
So I didn't know where you wanted to go with this, but I'm open to anything you got.
Well, I think I heard you guys start talking about it before I had my technical problems last week, but it's a very unpopular position. My dad is a World War II vet, was a World War II vet. There's a lot of vets and quote unquote serving your country, as it is often referred to as, is held in very high regard. And even I am very personally fond of that generation of our fathers, Tom, that served over there. And again, I said the words, they served and what have you. But if you look at, I guess I'm not taking a position on which war is more just, not just, whichever. It's just I heard some numbers that were just staggering. Memorial Day. About it was in a particular article. I think it was on USA Today. One of them was almost 60,000, 58,000 Americans died in the Vietnam War, and I think it's hard to broach this topic with it being so sensitive to those that have served, those whose lives have lost, and those who are being recognized and appreciated, and our society has a tendency to build such a high regard for those folks. And personally, isn't it fair to say that probably they were out there making some sacrifice?
Oh, they no doubt were.
And so when we take a stance on this as we do about not being in favor of war, I don't think we're insulting those individuals.
Yes and no. I guess I think it depends on how you want to take it. Is in part the deal.
Yep. And I know where you're going on this.
Okay.
It's, why did they join up? If it's a voluntary war, why did they join up? What were their intentions? But I think more broadly, my issue is with the war machine of our state.
Yeah, if you were able to cut off, the military-industrial complex, I would argue the frequency, for sure, of wars. What was the statistic? Something like in the 200 years of the existence, roughly, of the country. We've been at war like 97% of the time, or some crazy number, right? And what I alluded to last time was, well, if you got a really big hammer, everything starts to look like a nail, right? Which means, well, hey, we got a problem. Just pound on the suckers. And I think I'm quite frequently criticized for not being practical. I'm all theoretical. I'm not practical. And this is one where I'll point back. Well, you look at the last 200 years and try to create the argument. Look at whatever the exact percentage was. I believe the number 97% sticks in my head. And make the argument that every single one of those fisticuffs, we'll call them, was absolutely necessary. Or I would argue, can you in fact describe those as just wars? In other words, very quickly, just war theory is basically a war of defense. None of those were aggressive wars. That's what you're going to have to try to attempt to convince me of. Okay? Now, beyond that, let's assume for the moment, we'll take that argument away, but we'll just say, hey, some of them weren't defensive wars. They were, in fact, aggressive wars. I hope somebody could concede at least one is, without going in the whole argument of what that is. But if there was anyone who engaged in that war, whether you're in the leadership or you went in as a soldier, right, in any support role, if in fact it was an aggressive war and it was an unjust war, then you are actually supporting injustice. Okay? So what I'm really saying here is everyone, whenever you engage in a war, in whatever capacity, you ought to be absolutely certain of your understanding of what this war is about. Is it just or unjust? And then make your decision based on that, right? You can't do these things willy-nilly. Just as like the military-industrial complex and the political world shouldn't be getting us into wars that are unjust. But now, we talked briefly last time, and those who had been conscripted, like you mentioned the Vietnam War, that was a draft. And that puts some off of the soldiers, to be sure, in my view. If you kind of didn't have a choice, and you could argue, well, you did have a choice. You could, what were the guys' options? They were limited as they were. Run to Canada. I don't know all the possibilities, right? Conscientious objector. There may have been a number of other ways of getting out of that. But the point is, even if you have limited ways out, you're still, in a large sense, you are trapped into this. So they have some, it's not all on them, but it's a bad thing to be fighting an unjust war, a really bad thing. I mean, innocent people are killed. And the number that you cited, whatever, 60,000-ish? Was that right?
58, something like that.
Okay. This is typical of what happens, and I know Memorial Day is slated to honor war veterans of the United States. I get that. It's Memorial Day. It's a U.S. holiday. But another thing that Tanya and I brought up is, what about the innocents that were killed, that were caught in the crossfire, that were at the wrong place at the wrong time? Those are, they didn't even know, to some degree, war wasn't on them. They didn't start it. They didn't choose to be involved, but they got involved just because they got caught in a crossfire. And again, I'm not saying, somebody's going to make the argument, well, it's Memorial Day, dingy, right? We don't do that. But not only is it on Memorial Day, but there's just very little mention of, I didn't even know. They come up with all these words for people who get killed in drone strikes that are innocents. They don't call them, we killed an innocent person. They don't ever say that because that just sounds like there's fault there, and we just can't have that.
They call it collateral damage?
Collateral damage, yeah, all kinds of crazy words like that, right? They just make stuff up, and it just chaps me, and that's why I mentioned that. Anyway, but a voluntary war is a little different animal. Again, when people decide to go in, some people will also make the argument, well, I didn't have a whole lot of choices because I didn't have any job prospects, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but I do think there's a little more onus on such a person who volunteers to go in versus one who's conscripted, which I'd basically call kidnapping. But again, that's another story.
Sure.
Okay. Did you get a chance to address what you wanted? Did I respond to it?
I think it's a very uncomfortable topic for a lot of people, and I think we would really, we're very much outside the mainstream on such a position. I know lots of people that are against wars, but we're kind of taking things a step further, and I think in the end, again, I'm hoping that we make you think in this.
Yeah, the bottom line for me is no one is unaccountable for their actions. Now, okay, say it's wartime, we're starving to death, and I wind up stealing stuff from Brad, who lives next to me, the farmer, who's got lots of food. I got no food.
And people say, well, is that stealing? I would argue, yes, it is in fact stealing. Now, it would, if we weren't in total disarray at that point in time, which I assume you kind of would, but if you weren't, right, you'd have the opportunity in a free society to have me prosecuted, right, to make the case in front of an impartial third party to determine if in fact I'm stealing and what the retribution should be. And again, in a free society, the concentration there, the focus would be on retribution, right? Like, what do I have to repay you with because I took your 7 chickens? 7 chickens and, $100 to make you whole for your time and your frustration, etc.
Yeah.
And whereas today, it's basically, the state brings charges against me and I got to pay a fine to the state. Well, what do they got? It's just a money collecting scam for them. I didn't steal their chickens, right? And people say, hey, again, they were supplying the court. You got to pay for the court. Well, if I got to pay for the court, which I'm happy to do, I want to work with you to find an impartial court. I only have one court system to deal with? That's essentially no choice. So anyway, I got too far down that.
Well, I think my main point is, popular or unpopular, probably very unpopular, as our position is. In the end, I think I would want it to be clear that we are against unjust wars.
Absolutely, that's the tip of the spear, right? I mean, that's the root of the problem.
And I guess the second part of it is I challenge you to stand back and acknowledge that our state has a, whatever Tom just said about the number of years we've been in existence versus the number of years we've been at war, that the state certainly has a propensity to get involved in wars, and you can make your own determination, I guess, as whether you feel those wars are just or unjust. I think a person could go a long way towards that justification both directions. But I think it's pretty clear to me that most of these seem to be unjust, and there probably would be other ways of settling these situations.
Yeah, Rothbard has a whole portion on just war theory. So if you really are interested in what a just war is, and I think Tim tried to call me and I wasn't paying attention, so I'm trying to call him now. So
hey,
are you there, Tim?
I'm here.
All right. Sorry, I missed. I think you tried to call me, didn't you?
I tried to at one point. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. That's the mail thing. I can only pay attention to one thing at a time. Sorry, Tim.
No worries. No worries.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Cool.
Good to be here.
Where are we? I assume you have the docket or one of the.
I do.
Okay, cool. I was just going to talk a little bit about last week's show, and here's the basic deal. Why I had this great idea. Just like everything, I have these. Well, in my own mind, really great ideas, and then I forget what they are. So, I really couldn't get. My son actually is the one who had a great synopsis. He goes, "This is actually the main point. You have to reiterate that." Well, of course, I asked him a couple times this week, "Hey, do you remember exactly what you said? Because I don't remember." And he's like, "No," and he's working now. So anyway, I'm really kind of missing my main point here, but I had a couple other points that I wanted to mention. Tanya and I talked last week about the notion of a representative government, right, and all this stuff, and I put some Lysander Spooner quotes in there, and I would argue he was basically using logic, and that, by the way, that we posted that on the Facebook page. That video was embedded in an article that we posted on the Facebook page, something like "The government doesn't care what you think." I can't remember the title of it. But it basically was a compilation of statistics, and I would argue definitely useful statistics, informative statistics. And here's my shtick on this whole deal. It actually cannot or does not prove nor disprove anything. It may back up the theoretical case, but it can lead you to the wrong thing. So one of the things I wanted to get to today, and we will in this first news story here in a second, was there was let me get back to it. It was that article I'm pointing to. It was an article from represent.us, and it was a statistical compilation from Professors Martin, I believe it's Gillens. I could be mispronouncing his name, Princeton University, and Benjamin I. Page from Northwestern. Okay, they were the ones who accumulated the, obviously very reputable institutions. A lot of people look for them. So let me just read this. I pointed out that the statistics are interesting and can in fact supply examples supporting proper theoretical arguments, but I caution all that it is the argument that wins or loses the case. Statistical evidence cannot prove nor disprove anything. In the words of Hans Hermann Hoppe, a priori theory trumps and corrects experience, and logic overrules observation, and not vice versa. So this next article, Brad's going to hit us with this. I thought this was interesting. I think you saw this, Tim, the medical journal one.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, way cool. So with that, I wanted to have that as a little backdrop when we move into this story. So I'm set, and that's all I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail recapping last week's show because we don't have time. But by the way, if anybody's interested, I reposted that on the Facebook page, the link to last week's show. I'd encourage you to listen to that. Alex said Tanya was so good it was like an NPR show. So she's going to have her own NPR show, and I'm still going to be out in the cold. Anyway, go ahead, Brad. So let's do that news story. I don't know if you guys have that handy. I certainly do, but if not, let's do it.
It's always a better show, by the way, when Tanya's on.
And Tim.
All right.
Oh, no, yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Tim brings a lot to the show. That's why we have him on.
Thanks, guys.
So Tom, you want to read the synopsis? Is that what I'm doing?
Yeah, start going through it, and I wanted to read actually some right out of the article because I think it kind of knocks people's socks off. So we got to get some of the details in there.
Okay, so the editor-in-chief of the world's best-known medical journal is stated half of all the literature is false.
Yeah.
So what's he mean by that, Tom?
He is the editor-in-chief of The Lancet. It's considered to be one of the most well-respected, peer-reviewed medical journals in the world. When I say he, it's Dr. Richard Horton, for anyone, right? I've long had this trouble, and it relates to what I just said. But he published something, and let me just read what he says. The case against science is straightforward. Much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, may simply be untrue. Think of that. Afflicted by studies with small sample sizes, tiny effects, invalid exploratory analyses, and flagrant conflicts of interest, together with an obsession for pursuing fashionable trends of dubious importance, science has taken a turn towards darkness. I'm thinking with that, I got to throw that to Tim. Your thoughts on just that statement?
It's interesting because there was a Facebook group. There's a Texas Libertarians Facebook group, and Kathy Glass, who was a candidate for governor a couple years back. But anyways, she had posted similar article about the link or the debate about the link between some immunizations and autism.
Yep.
And her point in sharing that was that science is so full of junk. At least or maybe a better way to put it would be it's a conflict of interest. So the scientific findings that are out there, they're muddied up with researchers that have a conflict of interest or are using bad science or bad techniques, that it's really hard to come to a realization of the truth. What is the truth, quote unquote? What are facts? What are theories? What are kind of absolutes when it comes to science? And I had this interesting dialogue with some of the people on this Facebook page. But it comes down to that it's what are we as a society? And when I say society, I mean my definition of society is a group of individuals. But what are we as a group of individuals to do, or how are we supposed to weigh out what scientific, quote unquote, research has determined to be true, to be absolute, to be safe, unsafe? It is a problem. But unfortunately, I think that most people just take it for granted. If scientists or some scientist has come out and said this is safe, this is unsafe, this is true, this is not true, we don't question that, or at least we've been kind of trained to say we're not qualified because we're not scientists to question that. And so we just have to kind of defer to the experts.
I think this, part of my motivation here was to drive to your blog post that we're going to talk about here on our feature story tonight, is that it's kind of this whole deal, and it's obviously not exactly the same. But many people make the argument, hey, whatever. My opinion, my work was published in a peer-reviewed journal, and that therefore they kind of are essentially trying to make the case closed, right? It's fact because it made it through the peer-reviewed deal, so it's over. And the problem is, what if you got one peer-reviewed article that essentially, or at least in part, conflicts with another one? Now what do we do, right? Even the libertarian world is looking at this with axiomatic statements. That's another thing I'll leave off the table, but interesting nonetheless. But let me just read a little bit more from here, because it drives to something I think is really important. Not only, we talked about earlier of, sample sizes that are too small, I guess, in a sense, outright fraud where, hey, I've got 5% of the data that doesn't fit, so I just disregard it, right? I make things that want to conflict with what my thesis is or my theory is. I just get rid of it. I, pretend I never accumulated that data. But here, let me read this just a bit. It says, it's common for many to dismiss a lot of great work by experts and researchers at various institutions around the globe which isn't peer-reviewed and doesn't appear in a quote-unquote credible medical journal. But as we can see, peer-reviewed doesn't really mean much anymore. Credible medical journals continue to lose their tenability in the eyes of experts and employees of the journals themselves, like Dr. Horton, right? He also went on to call himself out, in a sense, stating that journal editors aid and abet the worst behaviors, that the amount of bad research is alarming, that data is sculpted, and this is the important part for me, that data is sculpted to fit a preferred theory. And the reason that part is important to me is, why would that be the case? I mean, why would that happen? And I'm just interjecting. This was not part of the article. This is just what struck me when I was reading it. Well, because if you're a researcher, especially if you're in a public institution, but if you're also in a private institution, it applies. You want to get grant money, right? And that grant money comes from the state. So it's hard that, grant money is made available. And I honestly do not know the full extent of the process. I don't know if basically money shows up and go, hey, we have money available for you guys to research this, or do you make the request? I think both are the case, but I'm not positive of that. But think about that. If the money is available, and the big one to bite off that's really going to get people to fall off their chair is the whole climate change deal, right? I would think, and I've read in many articles that scientists who are maybe the word is formally respected in the field, that speak out against climate change, it's a career suicide in a lot of cases. Now, I can't say that in all, but why? I mean, partly is they're going to get blacklisted by the rest of them because they're saying what they don't, want them to say. Why? Because in part, the money train for research comes from the state. And if you say, hey, everything you guys over there, 10,000 scientists are doing is all wrong, first of all, that's insulting to them, to be sure. But it's partly political suicide you're not going to get any more grant money, fella. The game's up. So it takes a lot of courage to speak up is my point. Go ahead. Sorry.
And Tom, so in that same article, the editor, so you had mentioned Dr. Horton, who's the editor of the Lancet.
Yes.
Another editor of a very well-known medical journal, the Journal of New England Medical Association, JAMA, Dr. Marcia Angel, I think.
Yep.
But she made the same. Basically the same statement that even in the New England Medical Journal, she's finding the same thing, and she's come to the same conclusion. And I will tell you that in a previous, almost in a previous life, many years ago when I was in college. I was actually involved in doing some biomedical research at one point a long time ago. Like I said, I was on a different career path, but I was involved in doing some research. And for researchers, whether they're scientists, physicians, drug manufacturing companies, and so forth, they will usually come up with a hypothesis or a theory, test it, and come to the results. When they find results that they think are printable, that someone will put into a journal or into a medical reference, they shop that around. And so you're taking your results and you will shotgun it to maybe 20, 30, 40 different journals, hoping that someone will pick it up. And that's a lot of times how they work. It's really you're just hoping that at some point someone is going to be like, yeah, that seems like it's legit, and they'll publish it. Then you can point to it and say, I have this published paper that we did some research, and here are the findings, and there you go. It's in. You've never heard of this journal, but it's out there now. It's been published. I'm a published researcher, and that happens all the time.
Which raises your stature, by the way, right? I'm published. I got 20 articles published, or 5 or 10.
Yep.
And not only raises your stature, then theoretically, at some point, raises your pay.
Right. And you got to wonder, right? So, and I don't know what the statistics are, but let's say you shopped your same research findings to 20 different journals, and they all turned you down and said you had shoddy math, or your statistics were not right, or your sample size was not right, or it was just bad science. But that one journal picked you up. I don't know what the solution is there, but does that happen? I wouldn't be surprised if it does.
I'm sure it does. There's errors all the time that are created, even in a free market. And again, in a free market, they would be corrected over time. And I would argue the same thing. So I'm the journal, and I'm taking on these shoddy characters. I would argue the best regulator is the consumer, and the consumer will eventually, it may not be on document number 1 or printing number 1, but they'll eventually catch up, and my reputation will go down the turlet, right? But now things are bent because of the state's involvement, right? Because of these grants and all this stuff. And so now my point is shoddy stuff becomes accepted stuff. And I think, so if you eliminate the state, I think things will ultimately be better just by removing that alone. But I do think the consumer is a little falsely believing that, well, it's peer-reviewed. These guys got government grants. They couldn't do this if they didn't know what they're doing. So they kind of, see it. Some people see this as a stamp of approval on it already. So they don't think about this critically themselves or as a consumer and go, wait, let me really think about what this guy is saying. Using my own knowledge, and hey, if I don't feel I have enough, I'm going to call Tim up and say, Tim, do you know anything about this? Help me out, get me through this, because it doesn't make sense to me. And you may say, hey, I know Dr. So-and-so, he was involved, let's ask him, right? So there's ways that a consumer can do it, is my point. And again, to me, the thing that is, these errors that people will, cooperate, or they'll pull the wool over your eyes. That will happen in a regulated market. It will also happen in a free market. But I do believe the propensity for them to do it in a free market is less, because the consumer is the most stringent regulator, and the consumer will root these things out, right? Like I say, the journals will lose their credibility. They'll lose their reputation, and I don't think they have a long-term play when they do that.
Yep.
So that's where I am. All right, Brad, I'm sorry. Did we cover, I think we covered everything on that we really wanted to say, if I remember right. So move us along, please, sir.
Okay. We are, where we to
the director of the nation's airport security was reassigned.
Oh, yes. Sorry. I got a page ahead of us, Tom.
Okay.
Yes.
That's actually a really interesting one. And I know Tim had commented on this earlier. I'll just did you see these articles, Tim? About
I did. I did. I looked at them all.
I know you have great friends with you're great friends with the TSA. I'm well aware. What are your, before we go into these, what are your thoughts on this whole thing?
I just, I think of the world pre 9/11, and pre 9/11, I hated flying to begin with. I mean, it just the idea of kind of being crammed into a sardine can with dozens and dozens of other people for however many hours you're going to be on there, and packing all of the things that you're going to need into a little 3x5 box suitcase. Whenever possible, I prefer to drive if I'm traveling domestically. But post 9/11, I mean, it is such a nightmare to have to think about, can I bring this size mouthwash with me on this trip, or is it going to get, confiscated at the gate? Can I bring my shaving kit with me? Can I bring, do I have the right shoes on that will easily come off when I go through security? I mean, it is such a hassle, and I don't think most people believe, and the study that came out go to prove our point that this has made us any safer. I mean, all it has done is it's clogged the travel industry. So it's slowed down the process. It's created a lot of headache for travelers that want to get from one place to another. It has legalized, in many cases, invasions of privacy, physical molestation. I don't even want to go into searches and things like that. But those kinds of ridiculous offenses that you have to endure if you get flagged as a random security pat down or so forth. But it's just, I don't think anyone is actually going to stand behind the TSA and say, yeah, they're making us safer. They're making the world a safer place. And yet, most people don't do anything. They don't complain about it at all. They're just, that's the world we live in because it's a dangerous world out there, and we need people to keep us safe.
That was my angle that relates to your blog post, the whole safety thing, the TSA making you safe. Right. Yeah. But the other thing is, Tim, everybody knows that if you carry more than 3 ounces of shampoo, the terrorists win. I mean, that's case closed right there. I saw that on the internet somewhere. I just laughed. I'm like, it's so true. But people, and like you say, people just sit there and take it. This is all inspired by a number of articles this week that were in response to, I guess, I think this audit took place in a number of locations, right, by a number of, undercover auditors, if you will. Check this out. 70 undercover tests. They failed 67 of them, right? And wait. The agency has a long history of failing tests and missing loaded guns, knives, and explosives, right? I mean, I'm not at the right article here at the moment. I'm trying to find, but it was incredible, the stuff, again, that went right on through. It's not, to your point, everybody takes this as basically a sheep because they think, hey, these guys, this, like you said, this is the world in which we live in now. This is the reality. We have to, be more conscientious about our security. And if we have to give up some freedom, which I believe is a false trade, if we have to, we do that because, hey, if at least if we're secure and safe, we could live to fight another day. If we take these chances and we lose out, game over. It doesn't matter how free you are because you're gone. That's argument a lot of people make. But I just flip out over this. I cannot believe that, this statistically, this backing up the point. The TSA is not keeping you safer. The TSA is it is accomplishing a number of things. It's wasting your time. It's violating your rights. It's making transportation more expensive. But the best thing for all of them, it provides them with an additional mechanism, of control over you. I mean, to me, that's what they're accomplishing. I mean, and wonderfully so. I mean, they're good at it. I'm not going to argue that. But that's my takeaway from this whole thing. I don't know. I'm sure Brad had a couple thoughts on this, too. I'd like to get his thoughts.
Well, so as I was following this, I think that the article broke, and then I think when I went back and glanced at this again, it was updated that the director of the security was reassigned. So that's the golden parachute in the government world. But how can I disagree with either one of you with what you're saying? I'm going to travel on Thursday, and I'm just dreading it.
Yeah, it's just I'm reading here. According to ABC News, a new TSA report found that Homeland Security Red Team personnel, whatever, I'm not sure what that means, when posing as a passenger, were easily able to smuggle dangerous materials through checkpoints. Upon hearing the results of the tests, Johnson reportedly went to TSA headquarters in Northern Virginia for an in-person briefing. Officials told ABC that they had already
implemented changes based on the results of the red team test. I mean, how many times have we heard that, well, they had a breach, so they changed things, so this can't happen again? And I'm just amazed again at how many people go, well, nothing's perfect. There's going to be breaches, and so they're making the appropriate changes. So, again, it's basically playing checkers and sliding all your chips to the other side of the table, or I don't know if checkers is right. It's like, you got to be kidding me. Why do people believe this? And I think it's a conditioning that they've received. And
Tom, what's really I've seen this on social media so many times, but it's such a poignant observation that if these TSA screeners are actually doing the job that they're supposed to be doing, right? So they're keeping all of these unsafe materials, potentially bombs or explosives, out of the airport. What do they do with this stuff that they confiscate? They just put it in the trash can right next to the front door. So if you were actually planning on walking in the airport with a bomb, all they're going to do is basically tell you to put it in the trash can so it kills all the people waiting at the TSA screening line, just not the airplane itself.
Right. That's nice touch.
That's keeping us safe.
Yeah, no kidding. There's one. The TS guy went with a mock explosive taped to his back, and the TSA agents did not catch it on the I don't even know all the different scanners they have now. But they didn't even catch it on a pat down. Apparently, this guy had it taped to his back. And again, people persist. Well, they're keeping us safe, Tom. You don't understand how dangerous the world is. And of course I don't. I mean, I'm not privy to all the secret information that's out there. And maybe not out there is the right word. That's available to a lot of the bureaucrats. But I don't see this as any evidence of saying, well, this is actually working, other than working for the state. I mean, I get that. I don't think it works for private individuals. So, all right. I think anything else, Brad? If not, let's move on to my best buddy, Denny Hastert.
Another good story.
Oh, can you believe that one?
Yep. So the former House Speaker Dennis Hastert was indicted by a federal grand jury. According to ABC News story by Megan Keneally.
Yeah, I think so.
Sources say two male students who knew Hastert, who's 73, when he was a high school teacher and wrestling coach before he entered politics, have accused him of sexual misconduct. Hastert was indicted for bank fraud and lying to the FBI about the reason why he was withdrawing money. The bank fraud charge comes as a result of the former making well over $1 million in withdrawals by taking it out in increments of less than $10,000 to avoid having to report it to the FBI. If convicted of both charges, Hastert could face as many as 10 years in prison. The judge presiding over Hastert's case twice donated money to his election campaigns, according to BuzzFeed.
Let's get to Tim here, since he's the banking guru. Apparently, okay, one of the articles, he was actually taking cash withdrawals like in the $50,000 range. Yep. And then, you know what structuring is, I assume, right, Tim? If you could explain that to the audience so they know.
Well, yeah, so there are certain laws, federal laws that are on the books that basically, if you try to withdraw or deposit more than $10,000 at a time, you have to go through a lot of hoops and hurdles to fill out a bunch of paperwork. The government starts tracking, well, why do you need all this cash at once, or where did you get this cash from? And the genesis of that legislation is basically it was an effort to track down and put pressure on drug dealers. So the law was passed because drugs are most, at least as far as I know, I don't think they take credit card, but drug dealers, they operate in cash, and so they move lots of cash back and forth, and so the law was passed to try and keep an eye or keep a tab on suspicious cash transactions. So the basis is access to more than $10,000.
Oh, did we lose Tim?
Drug dealers are smart, right? So what they do is, so now instead of taking out or depositing $10,000 at a time, they take out $9,000, and they'll do it over a couple weeks, right? So they'll take out $9,000 here and $9,000 there, and then $8,000 here, and so they'll do it in bits and pieces. But then even then, the banks are kind of looking at patterns that even if you don't take out more than $10,000 at one time, if you have like this pattern of large withdrawals or deposits, then they'll also flag you as well.
Yeah, and that's how Hastert was, originally, I guess, confronted by the FBI. And the deal was, right, when a former politician is doing this, they're looking for, political misconduct, right? They're like, hey, wait, why is this guy doing this? And, of course, Hastert first said, no, I was just keeping the cash, right? And then So he lied to the FBI. That's a really bad thing, to lie to the state. That's like the worst thing you could possibly do. And that's where I really wanted to go on this thing. And I know you have the political part where the people who are, the donkey people don't like the elephant people. And they're saying, hey, see, these guys say morality stuff all the time. They're preaching all this crap, and they're just bad dudes too, right? They're breaking the laws. But my point on this deal is outside of the political thing, because that doesn't really interest me too much. That happens on both sides, big deal. But the deal is, supposedly he paid out about $3.5 million, maybe to two people, for sure to one, maybe additional. And maybe this was a case, and this I'm just saying what's been circulating. I'm not telling you this is the facts of the case because that hasn't been heard yet. But apparently this was some sexual misconduct with some guys on the wrestling team at this Yorkville high school. That's what the accusation is. But check it out. He's not being charged with any of that activity. His problem is that he lied to the FBI and he, did the structuring, which is essentially trying to evade detection by, I don't even know what agencies that all do that checking in the banking world. Tim definitely knows that. But, right, that's his problem. So here's the deal. This is what happens in a state of society. You lie to the state trying to cover up what I would call a real crime, a violation of somebody's property rights. They don't charge you with the actual underlying crime. They charge you with the cover-up part. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you, hey, you should lie. But there's something really wrong here when people say, we have this system, you don't understand, Tom, so we can, obtain justice. Well, I'm arguing, well, what about the people, the single guy or maybe two or whoever was, who was a recipient of this abuse from Mr. Hastert? And again, this is all alleged at this point, but assume for a moment this is true. How come they don't go after the actual crime? They're going after the other stuff, right? It just seems, I'm hoping to point out to people how this is upside down and how this would not be the case in a free society. Your thoughts, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. So the actual law itself is called the Bank Secrecy Act. It goes back to the 1970s, and like I said, I think criminals who were the intended target for this legislation,
right,
have figured out other ways to hide and move their money. So I don't think this $10,000 restriction on per transaction is really stopping any real crime. It's just creating a hassle for consumers. It's creating a hassle for banks. It's creating a hassle for people who are not committing any real crimes.
Yeah, I saw something somewhere a while back, and basically saying, in a state of society, if you do something against the rules of the state, now that's a serious offense. But if you actually violate somebody's property rights, it's really not a big deal. We don't have resources to chase that stuff down. Your car stolen, that's not a big deal. We're over here, we're trying to bust some college kid for something, right? It's like, you got to be kidding me. But again, I would argue in the state, success is failure, and failure is success, and that's what you wind up with. All right, Brad, I think we're good unless you have something to add.
Well, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't say that is it not like Keystone Cops that all these state agencies are watching and throwing charges against each other.
Absolutely.
So-
That's all fun.
Right. So how is it that there's going to be anybody in this sorting out resolution of this matter that's impartial?
Yeah, especially when the judge has donated, twice to Hastert's campaigns in the past.
Right.
It's an impartial third party. That's what the court is by definition. That's what they call themselves.
And I would also, one final comment is I would have an issue with why the state mandates what I can and can't do with my cash.
Because we're trying to catch bad guys, Brad. That's just the name of the game. That's
I know, but if I want
the dangerous world in which we live, we have to take your freedoms away.
if I want to put my cash, give my cash to the bank, and then I want to get my cash back, every other day because I like to do that because it's my cash. Why shouldn't I be able to do that?
That's.
I don't want to get too far off topic, but the whole thing about this, it reminds me if you know the history of when the United States got off of the gold standard and instead we went to a fiat. Our currency was no longer backed by gold, but was backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government, right? And yet, at the same time that they made that switch, they actually made it illegal for you to hoard gold, and so the government started confiscating, private citizens' supply of gold for that reason. So, yeah, this whole thing, it just stinks of an intrusion on our freedoms. That I don't know why people are complicit with this. If your response to this kind of intrusion is well, why do you need $10,000 in cash? You must be doing something illegal, or you must be doing something unscrupulous. Then maybe it will be that if the Fed keeps printing enough cash, that $10,000 will be like $1,000 is today, and so by then the law will just be flagging everybody because we'll be actually using that much money. I mean, that's another show, but
yes,
but yeah.
Well, everybody knows I like to use my $10,000 in singles and bathe in it because we've already disclosed on this show that Brad likes to bathe with rubber duckies, which nobody's supposed to know about. But anyway, full disclosure on this show.
But my rubber duckies are wrapped in one.
No equivocating here, Brad. That's just the facts.
All right.
Let's move on.
An article. I don't know if you have this article posted, but we will on our Facebook page. The Florida makes off-grid living illegal.
Yes, and this
right in the heart of why I so like liberty and freedom. So it mandates that all homes must be connected to electricity and the water grid. And what I don't know the date of this March 9th, 2014. Is this a new article or old article, Tom?
Well, obviously it's old article, but it's new to me. I just thought it was a little deflating, I have to say, because one of my ambitions in life would be to live, like in Wyoming. Why Wyoming? Lowest population density in the United States, and an off the grid place. That's my ultimate goal, but it's not going to happen. My wife doesn't want to go there. But let me read some of this to you guys, because this is again, maybe we were alluding to the overreach of the state in some of these previous articles. Let's go there here a second.
Okay, so wait.
Yeah.
Before you read that,
yes.
Anybody listening, what entity would be interested in making off-grid living illegal?
So maybe for those that haven't seen the article yet, maybe we can define what it means to be off-grid or what they're being charged with.
Yeah, I believe. Now I don't know this. I don't think. See, I don't really know because I live out in the sticks. So
Well, I think in her case she was collecting her own water, and I think that she had not connected to the power grid.
Yes, that was the case. Robin Spironis, I think, was her name.
Right.
And I'm probably mispronouncing it. Lives off the grid in Florida, completely independent of the city's water and electric system. So that backs up what you said.
Right.
But check this out. I got to read some of this because I can't write stuff like this. I'm not good enough. A few weeks ago, officials ruled her off-grid home illegal. Officials cited the International Property Maintenance Code. Listen to that. International Property Maintenance Code, which mandates that homes be connected to an electricity grid and a running water source. That's like saying our dependency on corporation isn't even a choice. The choice to live without most utilities has been ongoing for Robin. The self-sufficient woman has lived for more than a year and a half using solar energy, a propane camping stove, and rainwater. In the end, she was found not guilty of not having a proper sewer or electrical system, but was guilty of not being hooked up to an approved water supply. I mean, it goes on. It's actually just, in a sense, it's kind of funny, but it's really not funny. I mean,
well, it's also interesting in the face of these current times where the trend and it's rather in vogue to be self-sustaining.
Well, the technology is becoming more prevalent, right? That if the fuel cell ever comes to pass, right, you theoretically could be off the grid. Which is this going to potentially slow that progress down, right? And think about the thing of these things that are decentralizing. Like, again, we'll use the fuel cell for a moment. Third world countries that don't have this giant grid and all this infrastructure that's required to run this, they could catch up in a blink if this comes to fruition. They don't need that infrastructure. It's like, hey, Charlie, just go buy one of these boxes. Bing, you're done. Right? So are we putting more roadblocks up for the development of the rest of the world? I say yes, but that's whole. I mean, ask yourself these questions. It's like, this is absolute crazy. It's almost like the TSA.
And I don't know the details of what the chart, like how the charges in this part of Florida kind of got to where they were and what they were accusing her of doing. But I've actually had this argument with friends of mine about the rights to water, and so the article says that she was collecting and utilizing water that basically came from rainfall on her property. So she collected rainfall on her property and lived off of that. And she didn't have any sewers. So any of her waste was probably either recycled onto her property, but it wasn't like she was dumping that anywhere into the public sewers,
right.
Because they were sealed. The city actually came and sealed off her sewers long ago. But I've had this discussion and this debate with friends about whether you actually have the right to rainwater that hits your property. And I've had friends basically tell me, no, that that rain, even though it falls from the sky and lands on your property, it belongs to all of us. So you can't just start collecting that for your personal use. That, I mean, if it lands on your roof and it kind of floats down your lawn into the gutter, I mean that, and you prevent that from happening, that somehow is stealing from the rest of society. And I was like, wow, that's I don't even know where to begin with that argument.
Interesting, and it begs the question: at what point does it become your property so you can actually drink it or shower with it? Right.
Right.
I would actually say, hey, what she did was an example of how I started the show, which was original appropriation. Right. She mixed her labor, her accumulation system, with a previously unowned thing. In this case, being rainwater. It becomes her property. But I got to bring Texas into this, though, Tim, since you're from the land of flooding now. I was going to say land of drought, but that's no longer the case at the moment. Earlier this year, I'm back to the article. Earlier this year, Texas State brought several SWAT teams to a sustainable community and threatened to shut it down. Each one of the community members were initially handcuffed at gunpoint. It was called the Garden of Eden community and was totally self-sustainable. And he provides a link in this thing to that thing. But check it. I mean, it's not just Florida is my point.
Nope.
Not at all. Do we see a pattern emerging here yet? Anyway, that's all I really have on that. I don't know if you guys have any more to add. If I cut you off or something, I'm ready to move on, but let me know.
I'm good.
Well, okay. No, I think we're fine. The answer to the question is probably the power companies, probably the city, probably whoever is vested in providing that service doesn't want anybody to not have it.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that the corporations, especially public utilities or whatever, the
public-private partnerships and all these crazy arrangements that I don't fully understand could be in cahoots with the state. I don't know if I could see that coming.
Yeah, big surprise.
Okay.
Next story, Mr. Senator Rand Paul.
I think that was an interesting story, by the way. I saw Rand Paul. See, I'm already going off track because that's what I do. That's my specialty here. I saw him. I don't know if either of you guys saw CBS. I think it's the CBS Morning News, the one with Charlie Rose and the two gals. Rand Paul was on there after his, I don't know if is filibuster the right word? I can't remember. His long time that he was standing there yakking.
Yep.
Anyway, they were very hostile to him. Charlie Rose, I mean, okay, my wife says I'm not the most intuitive when it comes to people and personalities and stuff, but to me, he definitely had his dander up. And part of the deal was, hey, if you kill this Patriot Act or portion of it, or I don't even know all the details of exactly what the possibilities there, and an attack happens, aren't you responsible for what happened? And I'll have to tell you, now again, I'm not a big fan of any politician, but he did, in that circumstance, Rand Paul handled himself way better than I would have ever imagined. Or if you'd be telling me this story, what I saw, I'd be a skeptic saying, really, he did that well? He actually did. He just held his ground. He says, well, actually, the people who should be held accountable for attacks are the attackers. And I was like, but people are going to turn back to him or to anybody who supports the killing of this and say, hey, it's because of the security things that you took away is why this happened, so you're responsible. So anyway, that was just my little Rand Paul aside. But did you see the thing from Barney Frank? Did you guys get a chance to look at that, the video?
Yep.
Since you saw it, Tim, any thoughts? What are your thoughts from Barney Frank? Well, he's a former representative of Massachusetts, I believe. So,
well, I'm not a fan of Barney Frank. There are many things about him that I disagree with completely. Some of the legislation that he's helped pass, I'm vehemently opposed to. But in this instance, what he said was right on the money, and it was that it's almost like it's a moment of clarity that I think most people that stand for liberty and stand up for the cause of liberty we're waiting for and just hoping for an opportunity like the one that was presented to Senator Frank rather, to point out the hypocrisy in saying that, you claim to be this supporter of freedom and supporter of liberty in this one area or in this one particular niche, but when it comes to these other areas and these other niches, your record is actually not in line with supporting liberty and favoring individual self-ownership and individual freedom. So basically what Frank said was that, look, it's one thing, and it's a great stride for liberty to say that you can't have this legislation anymore because it's infringing on our right to privacy, and you're spying on your own people illegally, and that's great, and that's a great cause to stand behind. But at the same time, when you say that you support liberty and you support freedom, but your stance against homosexual marriage is not also in line with supporting liberty, then you've got some things to think about. Are you really are you supporting liberty when it suits you, or are you supporting liberty kind of universally?
Yeah, and I would argue that's one of the many problems of not being a consistent supporter of, as you well said, property rights. Right? It comes down to that as a legal issue. That's the legal issue, is property rights. Right? And that's what happens when you basically kind of pick and choose a little bit
And that's inevitably going to happen when you're a politician, because you're told by your handlers, hey, you need to support this, you should not support that, because this isn't going to help your numbers. It is not going to help your popularity, your reelectability, or in this case, his electability since he's running for president. Right? The other thing is, I think that's the problem here. That's not the problem. There's lots of them here. But one issue is, in my view, and I commented somewhere on this on Facebook this week, the cat is out of the bag as far as spying goes. To even remove this legislation in the staunchest terms, saying you can't collect bulk data. Any arm of the government can't do it. If you can't say it that simply. You got it's all going to be in legalese. But if you get something say something that simply, I still believe it wouldn't work, because the state cannot and will not limit itself. Again, I would argue, as a practical matter, look at the last 200 plus years. The state doesn't do it, and the body politic is not successful at making that happen. Right? So since the state has this technology, they'll figure out a way, just like we kind of alluded to black markets earlier, they'll figure out ways to get around this structuring thing, right? That you got to 10,000 is the cutoff. So they start taking away withdrawing and depositing $9,000 plus, right? They'll figure this out too, and they'll be able to do this. The cat is now out of the bag, is my point. And go ahead, pass some law that says they can't do it. They ain't going to stop it. I'm not a believer, and I guess that's more or less a skeptic in me. But that's where I am on that too. So I think there's a number of troubling factors here, I guess, is my overarching point on that. Anything from Brad on this? What your thoughts?
I'm fine. Let's keep moving.
Okay, move along.
Okay, so the next story is ISIS burns woman alive for refusing to engage in, quote, extreme, unquote, sex act. This says the UN.
Yeah, did you? I don't know if you guys saw this story, but
I did read it.
I read that story because I hadn't, kind of think. And the bottom line, and you say, why even cover the story? We're only going to take a minute or two on this. But the bottom line for me, after reading the information, assuming it's all accurate, I have no reason to believe that it isn't, but it, of course, may not be, is I just see ISIS or these groups is simply a criminal gang. I mean, I think people see this, well, they're, what do they call them, radical Islamic guys, and they got the religion, and it really, I just don't see it as anything more than these guys are a bunch of criminals. They're a bunch of thugs. And I'm not saying the war doesn't exacerbate that, but I think underlying there's some serious problems there, to say the very least. And this is what happens in war. And again, I'm not taking away responsibility from the perpetrators in here, but I just, that was my impression. I read the story and just thugs. They go by a different name, whatever. So I don't, nothing earth shaking there, but if you guys had additional, go for it.
Tim?
I didn't. I mean, I think we're on the same page there, Tom. It's tragic. It's sad. I would caution the hawks and the statists out there that would use this as an opportunity to further war or to further overseas aggression. I don't see it that way, but I would say, yeah, it is what they are. Yeah.
Hey, now what I wanted to do, which I'm not going to do, but I think Nick Ludwig, we're going to move on to your blog. I want to discuss that because it's another excellent blog post that you did, Tim. But this, I don't think I had this in the docket, but I think Nick Ludwig posted a little YouTube slice on one of your discussion. It must be the original posting.
Yeah,
did you see that?
I did, yeah.
I have that, but I can't, it just doesn't translate well without the visual. But just for people who know, this was from Return of the Pink Panther, Chief Inspector Clouseau with his French accent. It was so hilarious. He starts talking about, you do not have the proper license to, but it was a blind guy playing the accordion, and he had a monkey next to him. And he made this whole, he was being harassed by Inspector Clouseau, which, of course, he didn't realize, supposedly, that he was a cop at the time. And he said, he keeps saying, you got to have the
proper licence, and I just thought that was so relevant to your thing because it was so funny. If anybody wants to chuckle a little bit, especially after listening to Tim talk about his post, it's on YouTube. I don't know. You can look up Inspector Clouseau and license or something, or the Blind Man and the Monkey, I think is what it's under. It's hilarious. It's only like 2 minutes. I strongly encourage anyone who wants to chuckle, check it out. So that's not really a formal entry into your blog post, but that's what I got.
Thanks, Tom. So I did post this on our the Annoying Peasant Radio Facebook page, and feel free to go and take a gander. But I wrote a quick bit about something that I've run into a couple times in some conversations and debates, and the subject is licensing, and as we've been talking throughout this show, the idea is. Most people feel like if you're a licensed X, whatever it is, that you have a license, that somebody actually licensed you to do whatever it is that you do for a living, that that is some kind of a guarantee of safety, that you must have gone through some kind of training or apprenticeship or had a certain number of hours of classroom time that you had to complete in order to earn that license, and that is like a warm security blanket for you that you feel like, well, I know that I can trust this business person because they've earned their license to do this business, and the point that I was making is that that safety or that feeling of security is generally speaking unfounded. In fact, licensing for the most part does not increase our safety. And there's an interesting study that was done by a group called the Institute for Justice. They did this national survey of 102 different kind of low to moderate income occupations. And when we talk about low to moderate incomes, these are basically manual labor. There's a little bit of technical skill or training involved, but it's mostly manual labor that's involved. But these are jobs that people who don't have doctor's degrees or law degrees could easily train and learn and start making a living doing some of these jobs, or even start businesses doing some of these jobs. But the problem is that depending on what state you're in, the licensing requirements varied very drastically state to state. And what the study found, the Institute for Justice, what they found was that there is no correlation of increased safety because of the fact that the state sanctioned your license or the licensing body in the state granted you a certificate of some sort or a piece of paper that said you completed the required number of hours of training or paid. Most of the time, it's also with a fee. So you probably shelled out a couple $100 worth of fees to different organizations in the state. But just to share a couple examples, right? So like EMTs. So these are the EMTs are like the emergency medical technicians that are usually in the ambulances. So if you call an ambulance and they come to help you because you've been injured or somebody's been hurt, they're usually driven by EMTs. And so these guys are kind of first responders, right? So they will come and they'll triage you and they'll decide if they can treat you there, or otherwise they will kind of put you in the ambulance and take you to the hospital. There are also EMTs sometimes in hospitals or in medical clinics as well. But EMTs, these are people that actually face life and death situations with the people that they service or that they provide services for every day. If you compare the amount of training and requirement to be licensed as an EMT, which I think most people would argue, that's a fairly important job that you should have some kind of training to do because you're putting people's lives in your hands. You take that job and you compare it to something like, a hair shampooer. So somebody that at a beauty salon or a barbershop washes your hair, before or after you get your hair, cut and styled. and then you take and those compare the two. There are so much more. Whether it's training, whether it's coursework, whether it's hours of lectures or videos that you got to watch, there's so much more that's involved to be a licensed shampooer in some states than it is in the actual EMT. The most egregious is in 4 different states in Washington D.C. So 3 states in Washington D.C. Interior designers. So these are people that they'll design and figure out how and tell you how you can decorate your home or your office space and so forth. In 4 different states, and the states are Louisiana, Nevada, Florida, and Washington D.C. again. Interior designers are required 6 years of training and education and to pass an exam in order to become licensed as an interior designer in those 4 places. That's 10 times more training requirements than an EMT in the average EMT.
That's craziness.
And so what the point of this study that was done is it begs the question, well, what purpose does it serve? If it doesn't actually create more safe work practices or safer products for consumers, well, what does licensing do? And what they found is that licensing actually, all it does, and when we're talking about licensing, let me back up. In areas that require license, basically what we're saying is if you lived in, for instance, in Nevada, and you did not have a license to perform the duties of an interior designer, you couldn't do it. You'd have to do it illegally. So if you actually started an interior design business, but you didn't have the proper licenses in the state of Florida or Louisiana, you could be fined, or you could, I don't know if jail time is involved, but you could potentially lose property. You can be fined. Maybe if you keep doing it, they'll actually throw you in jail. But that's when we're talking about licensing. It's you can't even start the business. You can't start earning a living doing these things until you pass the state's licensing requirements. So that's what a licensing does. Licenses do. Most people will say, well, it's because they are keeping businesses legit. They're keeping them. They're training them. They're making sure that they're trained, that they're properly. They know what they're doing. That they're not rinsing first and then applying shampoo. It's the other way around. But the study, what they found was in fact, all licensing does is prevent competition from entering into the marketplace. So if I'm an interior designer in Washington, D.C., and I want to keep other interior designers, my competition, from coming into my marketplace and taking some of my business, what do? Well, I lobby the local authorities, the local legislature, and I say, hey, there are some unscrupulous and unprofessional interior designers in our state or in our city or in our district. We need to pass some laws so that they can go through the right training and get the right and fill out the right paperwork and pay the right fees to the state before they can start to go into business.
Sure.
And most of the time what happens is because those exams, because those training requirements, because those licensing fees either take up so much time or take up so much money before you can actually start earning a living doing those things, most people are discouraged from ever getting into those industries in the first place. And so all licensing does is it keeps out your competition if you're already in that industry.
And to add, the people who are already in that business, usually they're grandfathered in, so they don't have to go through that. They're just issued a license.
Exactly. Yeah.
You must have the proper license. And again, this is extremely serious because this is a crime against the state. I mean, right. It's not like stealing somebody's chickens or doing a real criminal act. This is against the state, so they take this very. You're the next Dennis Hastert if you do this. If you practice without the proper license. It's craziness, this stuff. And I totally agree. I think, arguably the latest great example is the whole Uber thing.
Yep.
I mean, where was it? There was some politician who was just whining about Uber and Lyft, and I don't even know all the names of all the other ones. There's a number of them that are coming in here. But, of course, it undermines the whole thing. I believe in New York City, the medallions are, or they had been, or they still are, or maybe they're even more. It was like $1 million.
Yep.
So there's guys literally raising any last penny they can. They're mortgaging their homes. They're doing everything so they can get the stinking medallions. But now you get to charge. What? I mean, they're crazy, astronomical amounts in New York City for a ride, where Uber, I assume, undercuts them tremendously. But yeah, and there's people there supporting the old system, right? And I'm like, hey, cool. I have no problem. If you want to ride that taxi, go right ahead. I have no problem. I just kind of prefer to get the same or maybe a better ride for like 1/10 of the cost. That's just me. But again, let the marketplace decide. If I'm the only dude in the world like that, well, then likely Uber's not going to make it, and the other similar comrades they have doing the same thing. But let the marketplace decide, I guess, is my point. Well, I don't understand. Again, I still think that the consumer is the most stringent regulator there is. The consumer can do this. I think there's also something we alluded to earlier is when you have this medallion, when you have the prépare licence, you believe that, or a lot of people falsely assume that you're well qualified. I mean, you got your plaque on your wall, your license, right? You carry it in your pocket. You got the medallion on the front of the vehicle. So they go, well, that means you're properly safety inspected, you're properly trained to drive, blah, blah, blah. I don't know all the things that are required in all those different instances. But, right, you have this, I would argue, a false sense of security. And if that didn't exist, you would be more skeptical, and I think you would even be a more critical consumer, and I think that's a good thing for the marketplace.
I was actually having this conversation, a similar conversation with my oldest daughter this weekend. And as many of you know, my family, we actually lived in Chicago, grew up in Illinois for many, many years, moved down to Texas about 10 years ago, and we've been here ever since. But, it's interesting to me that I keep up with some of the news in Chicago and in the Chicago suburbs. But I see all the time these businesses that these days if you're a foodie like I am, the big thing these days are the food trucks, right? So there are these small kind of independent artisans, basically. I mean, just some of the people that are producing in these food trucks are just creating incredible and really unique different dishes and ways and spins on some on different food items, but they prefer to be in a kind of a mobile unit, and it gives for kind of moving to different areas where there's more customers, but also it's less kind of a down payment to start your business. It's less startup costs rather. In Chicago, in Illinois, there's a huge move by the kind of quote-unquote brick-and-mortar established restaurant community to keep the food truck business out and to keep them illegal because of what? Because if you're a brick-and-mortar kind of established location restaurant, and you had to pay, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of dollars for the building that you occupy, and someone comes along with a $30,000-$40,000 food truck and starts taking up all your business, well, that's probably going to take you off. So what do? You try and keep them from entering the marketplace. You try to keep your competition out. And this is a big thing in Illinois and in Chicago, that food truck owners are having these fights with these restaurant owners because they're saying, look, if our food is customers like our food. They like the way that we're meeting them, kind of where they are by operating in these mobile units. Why keep us out of the market? If your food is as good as you say it is, then they'll choose to dine in your place. Other people don't want to sit and dine in a restaurant in a location. They'd rather kind of take their food to go. Why keep us out of the marketplace? And it's just that's all it is. They're trying to keep out their competition and keep a stronghold on the market that they have.
A former guest of ours, Jacob Hubert, was involved in I don't know if one case or a class action case or something, but a really good attorney in Chicago. If you're in that predicament, look him up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've heard the same deal, and I don't understand. I mean, I understand why businesses want those protections. They want to keep their competitors at bay, at least, or put them out if they can. Clearly, because why? They can raise their price. They can provide a shoddier quality. Right. And I would argue. Some people say, well, but there could be unsafe products or services available on the marketplace. And I would argue, why? What's wrong with that? What if I don't want to pay for that level, right? Let's say I don't have a lot of money. I'm I don't know, a homeless guy. Why would I be? Am I better off having a home that meets whatever the building codes are today versus I don't know, a really fancy cardboard box, right? That fancy cardboard box is illegal to put on my property, so I'm supposed to live out in the cold as a result, right? This is another one of those cases that a lot of people jump on board with this stuff, but they're hurting the very poor more than they are the wealthy. The wealthy can, well, I'll just pay more to go elsewhere. I'll pay the increased cost because there's less competition. But the poor are at a disadvantage here, and a huge majority of these people tend to support this kind of stuff. So, I don't understand it other than we, of course, have been conditioned for this. Oh, they're trying to look out for us, the nanny state, where they're going to make things better. I think that's your conditioning, and we're just asking you to really look at this with a more critical eye, and I think you'll find that you would agree with the Texas father of 7. He's brought the point to us again, and I think nicely done.
Thanks, Tom.
Anything else, Tim? I think we kind of did summed up. We did our conclusion there. What did we miss, Brad? Tell us.
I think you guys did a great job.
Wow, it was just a setup for you to say that to me. That's what.
Keep those checks coming, Tom.
Yeah, sweet. they are rubber, so don't worry about it. They'll come right back to me. I'll let you do. I have that quote that I wanted you to start our close out with. I thought it was a little interesting.
Okay, so arguing that you don't care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying that you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say.
Who said that?
Our guy Edward Snowden from the Blue Nation Review via Skype. Via Skype Stewart on Facebook.
Yeah. And here's why I had you do this. Think about this. Is Snowden vindicated with what's been happening, the Rand Paul thing? Right? Is this discussion that has now come to really a much wider debate than ever was, or at least was certainly before Snowden? Is he now vindicated? So is he like the really bad dude? What was Boehner, I think, said something like, I want to hunt you down or bring you back here and string you up or something. I'm not saying it exactly right, but he would definitely not. But is this at least some level of vindication for Snowden? What do you guys think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
To his credit, all these people who were he's a crazy traitor, blah blah blah. I think that this seriously weakens your case if that's the side of fence you were on. I think you're slowly going to have to be like a rat and get off the ship because it's going down. Anyway,
I was listening to the news this morning, and somebody from whatever the national security or some authority was being interviewed by this journalist, and they said, so since this thing expired, since whatever expired, Patriot Act expired, I think was it Saturday night or Sunday night?
Sunday night, I think.
Sunday night, yep.
And so he was like, so what's happened today? So today, did somebody go to the big building and flip the switch and say, oh, we can't collect that data anymore. And, I mean, he was being facetious, but yet, I think that's the perception that the politicians would like for us to believe, is that, oh my gosh, we're abiding by this. And so now we're not collecting it. And the guy's like, actually, no. He goes, there's a grandfather. There's all these things. He never even disclosed, and I'm in telecommunications, he never even disclosed how they gathered the data. And whether it comes to them streaming or in batches, or if they can just go in and read it or whatever it is. I don't know how it was, how it's delivered. But I loved how he tried to pin them down to make it sound like there was an actual event, and there's not. They're still gathering data just like they were.
And I'm not encouraging any crazy person, terrorist, however you want to describe them, but I guess, basically the shield supposedly is going down, and I agree with you that it actually, in fact, hasn't. But if that was the story, where's all the terrorist crazy guys attacking on at midnight, I guess, Monday morning?
Right.
It's another deal. The sky will fall if we don't have this.
Yep.
I wonder.
Yep. Keeping our wrap-up going, Tom?
Yep.
Thanks for everybody for joining us. Please tell your friends and even tell your enemies about our show. We'd appreciate that. Our next episode is a week from tonight on June 9th at 7 p.m. with a topic to be determined. Watch our Facebook page for that. Many thanks to Tim, the Texas father of 7, for joining us. Always a great time, Tim. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
We hope that we provoked you to think. That's sort of my mantra, and I think Tom likes it too. But please make your comments known on our Facebook page. We appreciate you joining us. Thanks, and we look forward to our next discussion. Until next time, this has been the Annoying Peasant Radio Show.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, guys.
Good night, guys.
Thanks. Here we go. Mac DeMarco, Goodbye Weekend, which I guess Tuesday night doesn't really constitute a weekend, but it does in my world.
Wishful thinking.
Every day's a Friday or a Saturday, right? Good night, everybody. Thanks.